Good morning, everyone, and welcome to High Trust Coaching Live. I am Hope Bourman. I'm the Divisional President for High Trust Coaching, and I have with me today, one of our High Trust coaches, Karen Crosby. So hello, Karen.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. This is going to be so much fun. I just can't wait to get started. So I want to tell everybody a little bit about Karen for a moment. So Karen is a mortgage professional for more than 35 years. She has closed over 134 units year to date and closed $60 million worth of business year to date. So congratulations, Karen. I know you've been working really hard on that. Since the year 2000, Karen has financed more than 4,000 families and closed in excess of $2 billion in mortgage transactions. Karen's market is in the LA area and also has a market in Arizona, which I wasn't aware of. And Karen is, I won't say most importantly, but we are very proud to say that Karen is celebrating her 1-year anniversary as a High Trust coach. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much.
So Karen, before we get started, that's quite a resume that you have there. So before we get started, would you say what are the one or two things that has contributed to your success?
You know, the most important thing that I learned over the years is not to overcommit. I had my mentor tell me one time when I got out of control because business had taken off, and I came in to find a note on my chair. And it simply said, undercommit, over-communicate, and exceed expectations. He never came into my office and said anything. He just left that on my chair. And I can tell you that was a huge turning point for me, because from that moment on, I was able to gather my thoughts, start my time blocking, although I had not met Todd then, and start to put things back into perspective. And I realized at that point that I was in a position where I was constantly saying, I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I'll call you back in 30 minutes. I learned that day, if you make a commitment, you have to follow through, not once, not twice, but every time. There are 4 things you control in your life, in my opinion: honesty, integrity, humility, and consistency. And from that point on, from that day on, those 3 lines made me start to say, are you okay if I get back to you tomorrow? And that, of course, depends on what my volume is and what else I'm working on. But I believe that is probably the largest thing in my career that has contributed to my success and kept me moving in that direction.
You know, it's really interesting, Karen. I had started in the industry in the mortgage banking environment, and then moved into a retail banking environment for mortgage with a large organization. And I think one of my culture shocks when I went into that banking environment is how people didn't return calls. And it was just amazing. And I always picked up the phone because that's what I was taught to do. And, you know, the client would always be so surprised that somebody picked up the phone and somebody actually answered, or somebody said they were going to do something and actually did it. You know, so it kind of, would you say it probably grew your business because people could rely on you, and people, what you said you were going to do, you did?
It definitely grew my business. And I use that motto today. And I say that to everybody that I mentor or work with. Undercommit, over-communicate, exceed expectations. That's the best you can do, and that's all you can offer.
Yeah. And it's interesting, especially in today's environment. I was talking to a client yesterday, one of our coaching members, and she was saying that she just got a new relationship with a new referral partner who is a big producer in her market area. And she was so, excited to get this new relationship. And he was working with one of the top producers in her market. And she said the reason why this agent chose me was because of the fact that I communicated, that even though we didn't close on time because of the volume of business that we're dealing with right now, she says the fact that he didn't have to call me, that I communicated on a regular basis with him, letting him know where we were, what our timeframes were, and that type of thing, that he appreciated that more than not closing on time.
I agree. And I run into that as well. And that's part of the, not overcommitting. When an agent calls me and says, can we close in 30 days, depending on which market we're in. You mentioned I'm in Los Angeles or California and Arizona. Arizona's having a harder time getting appraisers to come out for properties right now, depending on the area, especially vacation areas, Lake Havasu, places like that. So sometimes those appraisals are taking 3 weeks, and I'm letting the agents know I can have your credit approval completed. I want you to know we probably will not close in 30 days. I'm setting that expectation for you right now today. We'll push, we'll rush, we'll do whatever we can, but please be prepared and let everybody in this timeline know, let your seller know, let the buyer know, this may not happen. So it's again, like you just said, setting the proper expectation and communicating.
Yeah.
Letting them know where they're at. We found an appraiser. He wants $300 or more. Do you want to do it? Do you not want to do it? It's their choice.
Right. So let me ask you a question about that. So this is something that I think what a lot of our coaching members or people in our industry kind of run into. So on the topic of communication, is there ever a time that you just plain old don't want to make that call? You know, something's gone south, something's not going to close on time, the borrower got new credit, now they don't qualify. Is there ever a time that you don't want to make that call? And what does that call sound like?
Oh, never. Of course. Even 35 years in business, I've always told my team, it's not your job to deliver the bad news. It's my job. So you come and let me know what it is, and I will make the phone call. And I have to tell you, even today, there are times when I will stare at my computer, I will put it on my calendar, and I will snooze it. That's a tough call to make. But what I've learned is the sooner you make that call, the easier it is to give that information out. It's easier for somebody to swallow and process what they consider to be bad news or a setback when you give it to them straight and you give it to them, sooner than later. The longer you wait, no matter how hard it is, and no matter what, Mom, I took the last cookie, right? The longer you wait to say it, the harder it is to do it. So usually I just had to make that phone call with somebody where we had parents co-signing for the son. The dad took all of the income and gave it to the mom last year. So oops, he doesn't make any money anymore. We had to start all over again. Dad had to co-sign. Mom had to co-sign. Now mom stopped taking paychecks because they're self-employed. They wanted to make sure they had money left in the business during the pandemic. I'm like going, oh no. I call them and I see them socially also sometimes, right? We work out together. So I said, my phone call started with, I'm probably not going to be your favorite person anymore. And the second I got that out, it was so easy for me to tell him what happened. But it was so hard to try to figure out that first line was. So even now, 35 years in business, sometimes those aren't easy calls to make, but you have to make them. I only delayed that one day.
Right. Exactly. And so let's kind of get into this now. Now that we're talking about fear and failure and that type of thing. So, what we're going to be talking about is the failure trap, perception, and how to turn setbacks and failures into success strategies. In his book, Time Traps, Todd Duncan talks about the fact that failure is our biggest fear and something that most of us will avoid at all costs. He teaches us that this perception is a missed opportunity. Karen, talk to us a little bit. How can failure be a missed opportunity?
I actually have found that failure is an opportunity to grow. And if we focus on the failure, then we're not taking care of the new business. So we're letting it paralyze us and we're focused on the wrong things. So if we can dial into why we failed or why we think we failed, okay, not every failure is something that we created. So a failure can come in a form of all different ways. A failure can come in somebody who no longer qualifies, or they took out a new credit card and they have debt now that doesn't put them in a position to purchase the home that they're now in escrow for. So failure is not always a mistake that we made, but we are looked at to fix it, no matter what it is. So if we focus on the problem and not on the solution, then we stop taking care of all the other business that's being dropped at our feet. So we become paralyzed and we start to focus on it and we start to dwell on it, and then it becomes bigger than it really is. So if we can dissect it and if we can figure out what happened and where it happened, what created what somebody's considering a failure in the first place. So if we can dissect that and break it down, then we know how to fix it. We can go back one step at a time and communicate and say, here's where it happened. Here's either where it got missed or where we picked up on it or whatever. So when we do that, it opens up the doors for other opportunities, as opposed to being focused on the wrong thing then you're not going to see what's being dropped at your feet. You're not going to see or hear the phone calls that are coming in because your mind is clogged up with this issue that probably is not as big as we think it is.
Right, right. One of the things that I learned early on in my career was always taking 100% responsibility. And when we take 100% responsibility, then we own the problem, and we also own the solution. And so at the point in time that we, get away from pointing a finger and take 100% responsibility, irrespective of who, what, where, or when, then we can also own the solution. And I think that that's really important. That was also incredibly empowering for me when I kept saying 100% responsibility. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to manage this? How we're going to be, and so when I was making that, that telephone call, or when I had that failure, it was, this is what happened, and here are my solutions, right? So I always came in with always made sure that I came in with the solution. This is how we're going to manage this. This is how we're going to solve for this. This is how we're going to resolve this and move forward. And so we kind of just streamed right through it. So that's really kind of very important. And you're absolutely right, Karen. I think that it's really important to take a step back. And I don't think a lot of us really do that, or many of us do this, to actually take a step back and look at a failure or a setback or something that went south and said, okay, what could I have done differently? What will I do differently? Because I think that we get tested, and this issue will come up for us again until we've solved for it, right?
That's correct. And the other thing is, by taking 100% responsibility, I do the same thing, because when you do that, it doesn't allow them to attack you. Somebody can be upset. A client can be upset and frustrated, but it's our job to bring the solution to the table. Sometimes the solution is you have to wait a month, or you have to wait 2 months. You spent your down payment, or you took on new debt. We never know what, you and I don't have a specific what the failure is, right? But by taking 100% responsibility, even when I know I've discussed, don't open new credit cards, don't go buy new furniture, whatever. If I say to them, I must not have been clear when we had our first conversation, our initial conversation, I take responsibility for not making it more clear to you that was not going to work for us. So you're right. When you do that, it takes the attack out of it. But we do have to have thick skin, and that is no matter what happens, or basically who really ultimately is responsible. They have to have a scapegoat. People then become frustrated. When they become frustrated, they become angry, they're disappointed. So now they have to have an go into attack mode sometimes, because now they're defensive. The best thing that we can do when there is a mistake or something that has failed in what we're working on is, do not become defensive. You have to sit back and say, you're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. And let them vent. And most of the time, I find that they'll calm down. But you are correct. Go to them with the solution.
Right, exactly. And I think we just need to own it. I've talked to coaching members when something's gone south and something has gone awry, and I, listen for, listen through the whole process, and I'm already hearing what could have been done, what could have been done differently. If I tell them what could have been done differently, it's probably not going to impact them in a way that if they come up with it themselves. So my question to them is always, okay, this is where we are. What could we have done differently to avoid this? What will we do going forward? And, how can we set the client's expectations better? How can we make sure that they understand, whatever those things are, so that we just keep fine tuning our business, which is what I think you've done, Karen, in your business, is that you have just kept fine tuning until you've got now a very, very well-oiled machine.
I feel like I do, but like I said, we have days also where we feel like we can't keep up with it. But the other thing I like what you said is talking to a coaching member and saying, okay, now we know what happened. How could we have fixed this, and start to set that? I actually also do that with my clients. So not just my clients, but with my actual mortgage clients. I will say, okay, here's where we're at. Work with me on this. Let's put our heads together. How do you think we can solve this? Can we get a co-signer? Can we pay this off? Can we work on this? And when you enlist their help and you go to them and ask for their opinion, there's a saying that people support what they create. So if they believe that they were part of the solution, then they're going to support that solution. And the rest of the fear of making the phone call, the fear of talking about and apologizing and taking responsibility, that's now on the back burner. And what you have this person doing with you is helping you solve the problem and being on board with it and being on board with the solution. And that makes everything go back on track again. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So Karen, and that's such a really important point, which just takes me to my next question. So how can fear of failure hold you back from success? Just kind of like something goes south, you've had a failure, you didn't succeed in one area or another, there is a setback in one area or another. And, how can that really stand? And you're just decided to just keep moving forward and not deal with it, just keep moving forward and just kind of gloss right over it. How can that get in the way of your success?
Like I mentioned in the first, a couple of minutes ago, was when we fail, we often become paralyzed. And there are two ways. Either you're afraid to jump back into the game, or like you said, what happens if we don't address it and we jump back into the game and we pretend like nothing happened? Right. It's going to happen over and over and over again. If you don't understand, first of all, if you don't focus on and dial into why it happened in the first place, you're going to continue to run into those same problems, whether it's you making the same mistakes and failing to communicate properly or failing to set proper expectations. If you don't figure out why you failed and had that issue in the first place, it is going to continue to rear its ugly head over and over and over again. So the hardest thing is that we need to address it, which is what we talk to our coaching clients about. If we don't break it down and figure out which things to throw out, then we find ourselves like a hamster on a wheel. We're constantly running to fix things and put fires out, and we cannot be productive. So we miss a lot of business opportunities because the critical starts to overshadow the important, and everything becomes critical because of that one thing or those two things that you did not go back and address, take responsibility for, figure out how not to do it again, and then move forward professionally. That's what I found.
And I've also found that once you've gone back and set a solution, reset, what it's going to look like next time around, and so that it doesn't occur again. I think that there's a level of confidence that starts to build within someone when they've had a failure, they've resolved it, they've figured out what they're going to do going forward. What are my steps going forward? And now they have a level of confidence knowing that when this comes up again, I'm not going to fall in this trap again.
Correct. I like that. That's true. You do get your confidence. You do build your confidence. You know how to address it. You can see it coming. And when you see something like starting to come and slide sideways, you can jump in and fix it long before it gets to that point. The opportunity now, the experience, you have the information, you know how to go in and fix it before it gets to that point. That's very true. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's shift it a little bit. Let's shift this conversation a little bit, Karen, and let's talk about risk and mindset for a minute. Todd talks about the 3 risks that are worth taking for success. Those 3 risks are develop an impossible vision, become accountable to others, and set exceedingly high standards. So Karen, why an impossible vision? Why is that important?
For me personally, just for what I found, and especially when I started reading Todd's books and going to Sales Academy and attending Sales Mastery, and then of course becoming a coach, right? An impossible vision pushes us to explore and experience risks to meet a goal that you or others think are not possible. And when you do that, you expand your horizons and you realize that it may not have been impossible at all. So in doing that, you learn more, you become more valuable to your clients, your confidence level grows, and again, your peripheral vision grows, right? So you possible what you or others think is an impossible vision, but then you expand that. Now your vision's out here, and you're not so focused on this is all I can get done, you actually get to see that, wow, I actually can go that way and I can go that way. And what you thought you could accomplish, I think at least for me, I ended up accomplishing more than I think I can accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when somebody tells me that's impossible, I learn to go, oh no, that's not impossible. You know, being a brain surgeon is not impossible. It's not something that I had a vision of doing.
Right.
But I think if we push ourselves and we have the right focus and the right passion about something, that what somebody considers an impossible vision, including ourselves, we then have that experience, and then it's euphoric. And then you realize it was so exciting, and look what I've accomplished. And it makes you create what appears to be yet another impossible vision, and that is pushing yourself. You want to hit 20 million, you want to hit 40 million, but then you've hit 50 million instead,
right?
Because you implemented these programs and you pushed yourself to take that risk. I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's really interesting this year, 2020, that, majority of our coaching members, if not all of our coaching members, have increased their production and their business 2x, 3x, 4x times. And, one of the things that I keep bringing to their attention is, well, now you know it's possible.
Correct.
So now you know it's possible. And I'm wondering, as we start moving into business planning for 2021, what the conversation is going to be, and if it's going to be, well, if I can, mirror what I've done in 2020, I'll be happy. And I don't know that I'll accept that. I don't know that I'll accept that vision. Right.
Right. We want to push them. We want to push them to be the best version of themselves. And one of the things that I tell my coaching clients when they talk to me about my volume is, I compete with Karen Crosby. I don't compete with the guy next to me. I don't compete with the guy across the hall. I congratulate them. I think they're amazing. I compete with myself. I push myself because I know what my goals are. 35 years in business, I am not 35 years old or 30 years old, starting in the business, have a family to support. I'm in a different position. So now I want to take care of my clients, and I want to make sure that they're taken care of and that I am their go-to person. But I also want to train, possibly a few years from now, I'm not ready yet, but possibly a few years from now, the person who's going to succeed, be my successor. I want them to start to see these things and have these visions and have these dreams. So yeah, exactly. So I compete with me to make myself better. And that's what I tell my coaching clients. Don't worry about the guy next to you, what volume they're doing. Worry about how you're implementing your ideas, how you are envisioning, your volume and creating your impossible dreams and visions. Set your goals and focus on those. Don't watch the guy who's running next to you, because he could trip and fall. He could make a mistake. He could fail to address the failure, right?
Yes.
Focus on what you are talking about. Focus on what you want to do, and don't worry about what the guy next to you is doing. Stay in your own lane and follow through with your commitments and your communication with your clients.
Right. It's kind of circling back to your goals. And I would imagine, Karen, if you were competing with yourself and if you are your own competition, that I would imagine you keep that bar pretty high.
Definitely. I do. When you don't hit the number.
We're our own worst critics, right?
We absolutely are. And people will say to me, when you asked me this time what my volume was, I had to look it up because I didn't know. It's not something that I'm focused on. I'm focused on right now, like everybody else in this environment. If you've been doing this for a long time and you've been keeping in touch with your clients and you have addressed your failures with them and you have moved on and you have set your goals accordingly, I currently am doing 10 to 12 hours a day, which that's not the norm in the business. And of course, I've talked about this as you've coached us as coaches, and that is we're keeping track of our coaching hours so that we can figure out how much we are making per hour, right? So we can make ourselves more efficient. So right now, what I'm finding is that because of the pandemic, clients who are calling, so many of them are working from home. They are coaching teaching young children things that they did not sign up for, that they were not anticipating doing.
Right,
so
sure.
Most of my phone calls that maybe would have been 6 or 7 minutes to answer a question are 15 to 20 minutes. Anxiety is high, stress levels high, tempers are short. So in order to keep my business and my commitments with my clients, I have got to spend time with them, let them know everything's okay, listen to their story, but it's taking me more hours during the day right now to get my work done. And I'm okay with that. At this time in my career, that's what's necessary for me to keep the relationship with them going. And that's part of, for me, that's part of my setting my higher standards. That is being available to them. And if the first 10 minutes of the call is just venting about how they're trying to keep their 6-year-old in front of the computer for school, then we can talk about business. And I'm okay working those extra hours right now because I think it's important for all of us to make ourselves available, be, compassionate with what they're going through. And so, and that's to keep my goals. That's also to keep the rest of my clients intact and my business running. So that's how I'm working with that.
Right. Terrific. So become accountable to others. Why is that important? Why is that a risk to become accountable to others, or an important risk to take in your success?
When you become accountable to others, coworkers, mentors, a coach, it's easier to fail if you haven't told someone that you're going to do something. So when you become accountable to others and you put it out there and you say, this is my goal this year, or it's my goal to lose 15 pounds this year, right? The minute you put that out there to somebody, that person has a right to call you on it. And it's the same with coaching. When you put it out there and you're being accountable to somebody, then I will send an email or a text to one of my coaching clients. You haven't done your metrics, haven't seen you do your homework. I sent you some actions, haven't seen you come through on those. It makes us be, accountable, right?
Right, exactly.
When you tell someone you're going to do something, then that other party has a right to come in and step in and say, I don't see that you're doing what you said you were going to do. And that's no different than telling, for me telling you, I'm going to show up on this call this morning and then not being here, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's making us be responsible with our time blocking and with our goals. I think we reach our goals better when we tell somebody,
Exactly. I think that it also creates the momentum and creates that accountability that obviously Todd speaks about in the law of leverage, right? If you want to really achieve your goals, tell someone else, share your goals with someone else that you're going to achieve these goals by when, right? By that time, so that, that you actually will achieve that goal. So the last thing is, and we're starting to get running out of time here. This has been such an amazing conversation, but the last thing is set exceedingly high standards. So Karen, speak for a second around, what does that mean to set, and why is that important to success, and why is that an important risk to take?
I think this for me personally goes hand in hand with the impossible vision. When you set exceedingly high standards, it pushes you to reach beyond what you thought possible. And failing to meet that goal typically will not have major consequences. So if you set a really high standard for yourself and you only get 3/4 of the way, you still have improved yourself. So the higher, if you set a mediocre standard, it's not hard to get to. You don't become a better person. For me, the higher I set my standards, the higher it pushes me to get there. And if my standard is set up here, but I only make it here, I'm still that much better than where I started. So I think that part is important. And to also know, again, it doesn't have major consequences if you don't get there. It just makes you that much better. So that's what setting exceedingly high standards means to me, is to just be the best version of myself and to continue to push myself to be better at what I do.
Right. Well, the thing is the first time that I learned this from Todd, it really kind of, it obviously impacted me in the same way that it did you. But I took it another step where Todd is talking about the fact that when we set exceedingly high standards, that bleeds into and impacts the clients that we work with, the referral partners that we work with, the people that we surround ourselves with. And, so if we're setting those high standards, it becomes, our core values, which are some of the things that you talked about in the beginning of our conversation, high communication, integrity, honesty, those things that you can control within your world. And those are those exceedingly high standards that, this is the filter through which everything goes through. All my decisions are made, and how I'm going to do business, and how what my partners need to look like, right? What do those relationships need to look like? And when they don't look like that, that will you modify your standards, or will you continue to move towards that high standard?
Right. And you got to continue to move toward that high standard.
Exactly.
You can't, the minute you modify it, everything that you've put out there, and that's part of telling somebody, being accountable to somebody. The second you set that standard and you put it out there and people watch you, people are watching moves and things that we say and do every day, and we don't know it.
Yes.
And it's that same line of when you step out of your car into a parking lot and there's a piece of paper. Integrity is who you are when nobody's watching. Do you pick it up or do you step over it? Right.
Right.
I've never forgotten that statement. Those are things people told you, I don't know, you're 6, 10, 12, right? 15. Mm-hmm. But I always think of those things. Integrity is who you are when nobody's watching. And that's where I set my standards. And that's where I set my vision, is to be the person that I want everybody to believe that I am, but also to act on that, also to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I love that. So Karen, you have been a coach with us for a year, so congratulations, and thank you for being a part of High Trust Coaching. We've really it's been a tremendous amount of fun to have you join the High Trust Coaching faculty. You've got this monster business, been in business for 35 years. Tell me what made you decide to become a High Trust coach, and how has it impacted you in your business?
I believe that anybody in our business who's successful has not gotten to our levels without the help of somebody else, period. I don't care who you are. Mm-hmm. Everybody has had somebody in their life who's had somebody to push you, somebody to hold you accountable, somebody to teach you, somebody to come alongside you and build you up. Mm-hmm. And so as I was moving up through the ranks business-wise and professionally, the more business that I started to see myself doing, and the higher my numbers grew, I used to tell my team, the more our name gets out there and the more business we do, the more accountable we are to everybody who's watching us. And people are watching everything we're doing. Now they know who we are. Now they know our name. So now we have to stay, integrity. We have to meet our goals. We have to have better communication. We have to be more polite. We have to be more respectful. Mm-hmm. So in doing those things, I feel very strongly that somebody who's been doing this for years and has become a top producer, I had people helping me. I believe now that it's my mission and my responsibility to take that information on, pass it on to somebody else, and help them be able to come to, reach those goals and learn how to overcome failures. And I think it's our job to mentor that person underneath us. I think it makes sense to help them grow, and it's exciting to watch them grow. I don't know. I start to get really almost emotional about it because I love so much what I do. And I think that the more volume you have, the more you need to make yourself accessible to other people. Right. People open my door every day or call me, how would you solve this problem? How would you fix this? Coworkers. It's my job to help them, because when I had those issues 30 years ago, I didn't know how to solve them on my own. Sure. And if we don't help somebody else, and that's why I wanted to become a coach, if you don't give back to people who gave to you, I don't believe we get to keep what we have. I don't believe that we get to keep growing. Mm-hmm. And when people are looking at you, you want to be respected. When your name is out there, you need to be available, and you need to give them information to help them grow their business, because that $10 million producer next to you could be the next $100 million producer. Mm-hmm. With the right coach, with the right information, with the right help, and the right push. Right. So for me, when I came to Sales Academy for the first time, and you guys were talking about coaching, I practically ran and jumped in your arms and said, I want to do this. I want to do this because this is what we're about. We need to be able to take our information and our passion, and we need to pass that on to somebody else and help them feel the same way and get to those same levels.
Exactly. Well, Karen, you bring, so much value, immense value to our coaching, to the industry itself. We're so pleased and proud and honored to have you as a high trust coach, and your passion and your heart is, I think is what, really kind of comes through in everything that you do. So I want to thank you on behalf of Todd Duncan and myself for being a high trust coach. We are in the process right now of growing the high trust coaching faculty. So if you feel as though you qualify or you have the same passion and heart that Karen has, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, hope.bourman@hightrustcoaching.com. And I'd love to have that conversation with you. So key takeaways, Karen, anything you want anybody to kind of take away and implement this week?
I just want to say one thing, and that on a key takeaway is look at what you consider to be your biggest failure or most recent failure and try to determine why it happened and what you can do to avoid making that happen twice. And the one thing that I want to end with is make a mission statement for yourself. My husband and my son and I created a mission statement that we had painted over the front door of our house. And when we leave every day, it says, be humble, make a difference, make life better for others each and every day. And that is what I try to do. And I think sometimes that helps us overcome failures if we stop and we think about how we're going to make somebody else's life better. It helps us then learn how to address and how to make that telephone call. So takeaway is look at your most recent failure and try to determine why it happened. Don't avoid it. Write it down if you have to. Write down, break it down, and figure out how not to do it again. But don't be afraid to hit it head on. Hit it head on.
Right. That's wonderful. I think that's a great takeaway. And the only other thing I would probably add is everyone has one thing that they've been avoiding, not doing, maybe not calling that top producing agent to get an appointment, maybe not doing a coaching live, not doing a video or a Zoom call with the referral partners, whatever that one thing is. I ask you to move through the fear this week and do it anyway, and send me an email and tell me all about it. I want to hear.
I think that's great. I know we're running out of time. I just want to say one more thing.
Okay, honey.
That my mentor years ago said to me, he asked me to do something, and a coworker overheard our conversation. That's when we mailed applications. We didn't have email. And he asked me to mail an application. A coworker overheard the conversation, said, "Oh, I'm going to go over there anyway. I'll drop it off." 2 weeks later, when that hadn't happened, my boss came to me and said, "Why didn't you do that?" I said, "Oh, well, so-and-so was going to take care of it." He looked at me and said, "If I have to do it myself, what do I need you for?" And rather than cry, just so you guys know, there's no crying in mortgage. There's no crying in mortgage.
No crying in mortgage.
I stood there and looked at him, and it took me a second. And this is the same as a failure, right? I had to get a hold of myself and control my voice. And I said, "You are right." And I walked out of his office. In my head, I said, "You are never going to say that to me again." And he never had to say that to me again. And that was 35 years ago.
Exactly.
That was one of the other biggest things that I learned going through this business.
Yeah. So when you have a failure, I think, the great thing to say to yourself is never again.
Correct.
Right? Never again. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Good morning, Cindy. I see you come on board. It's great. Cindy Tomczak is one of our high trust coaches. It's great to see our high trust coaches join us. So welcome, Cindy. It's great to see you. And thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Karen, for your time and energy. I know you're very, very busy, and I loved, this conversation with you. And make it an amazing day, make it an amazing week, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.